Each of us have our own road, and so far into life we've traveled to Jericho, we've traveled to Emmaus, we took the journey to Judaism last week, and now Rowan is going to join me as we will share our journeys in unity. We've all come to unity in different ways. Some of us have come directly. Some of us have gone around and around and around and wandered like the Israelites for many, many decades to find it.
I can also just be very, very loud.
I want to make sure everyone hears what you have to say. For those of you who don't know Rowan, he is with our youth department. He works with our teens, which is just perfect. So we talked the other day and thought, these 5 unity principles are kind of the cornerstone of unity. So we're going to share a little bit how both of us have come to them and how they play out in our life. My journey is a lot longer, a lot more winding than Rowan's is. So Rowan, give us a glimpse of just how you started in unity and how that first principle, God being good and present everywhere, impacted your life.
So I grew up, I'm not sure how much this can pick me up or not.
Turn it on.
Hopefully, turn it on. Good. Okay. Everyone can hear me now, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I grew up in unity. My mom brought me here when I was 2, and that's kind of how it started and how it's gone. I never really went to any of the church. I've been to a handful of the unities as I've gone around with doing the Wow You and unity and stuff, but that's been about it. For me, the God being good and everywhere kind of really showed itself in particular because I grew up here. It was I guess the best way to call this is this was quite literally my sanctuary. This was the one place in the world where as a kid I wasn't always angry the entire time, which was not the case anywhere outside of here. At home and at school I was a very angry kid, I guess is the best way to put it. A good example of this is when I was 3, my mom wants to tell this story. I would sit over there on the bench with Gayla when she would play the piano for church. And for me, it was a big deal because I knew how to read already, that I could say the prayer for protection by myself. And so the first time I did it when I was 3, according to my mom, I don't remember this, I sit up on the bench in the middle of church and yelled, "Mommy, I did it." And
he did.
And it was kind of like the highlight of me, I guess, for that Sunday, since I was the youngest kid.
You had it memorized.
Yeah, after that point, I didn't forget. I had it memorized at that point. So it was it became easy for me to kind of keep up with it.
That sounds so nice, to be able to grow up knowing that God is that goodness.
Yeah, especially because at church it was very much like a second family. I kind of grew up here and I had 2 or 3 church moms that were not my actual mom. I had Heidi, I had Kim, I had Gail whenever she was around. Before she, Penny as well. Penny will remember me at my worst. Sure.
My journey to that first unity principle of God being good was not so nice and tidy. I grew up thinking that God was this presence out there that knew every thought I had. Boy, as a teenager, I had some thoughts that I really didn't want any entity knowing what I thought. And I also grew up learning the judgment of God and how everything I did was critiqued and judged, and this scorecard essentially, heaven, not heaven. Yeah, I was not tallying up on the good side. And that was very frightening to me, to think that this God entity was keeping score of everything I did. So I was in my 40s when I stumbled across unity, and I really mean I stumbled. I was in sales and marketing at the time, and so I was in my car a lot, and I was taking a different route to a hospital that I was going to, and I drove along and I made a right turn, and there on the corner was a Unity church, and it said Metaphysical Bookstore. It was in Hollywood, Florida. And I went into the Metaphysical Bookstore and I just purchased 2 books that jumped into my hands. And the first book was Emily Cavey, Lessons in Truth and How I Use Truth. And I went home that night and I devoured it. Wasn't quite sure what she was saying, but I knew it was true. You know, that intuitive knowing, I knew it was true, but I wasn't quite sure. And by this time, in my 40s, I had decided I just didn't have a room in my life anymore for a God that was going to condemn my life. I just didn't have a place for that, a room for that, and I couldn't teach my children that. So that Sunday, I went to Unity, and I heard God is absolute good. There's one presence and one power. God, absolute good, present everywhere. And I wept the entire service. And I thought of that goodness, that presence. And then 6 months later, it connected with me. There is one presence and one power. There is not God and the devil tempting me and trying me. There is God, and that God is good. And that was a huge revelation for this person, to recognize that everything in the universe moves on that presence of goodness. Everything. The seasons, the clock, my life would move in goodness. That really transformed how I looked at church, how I looked at God, what I expected in life, and what I wanted in life. And that opened the door for me to go back and continue unity. And then we got to that second principle, that we are in that image of God, that we carry that spark of divinity. All of us have it. So what did that look like for you, that you were...
I didn't actually completely grasp what that was supposed to be growing up. It wasn't until life got real hard that I kind of figured out what it meant for me, because the way the principles can be interpreted is different for everybody. I know you guys will hear me talk about it a lot. When I was in California and the fires got real close and the smoke was real bad, a lot of my team that I was with was doing like the traditional type of prayer. And they were sitting there and they were praying, and I'm sitting here going, praying isn't getting the fires any farther away from us. They're only getting closer. If God is if I'm a representation of God, if I'm made in the image of God, then I'm going to put stock in myself. I'm going to pray to myself that I can find the tools, whatever I need to do, to figure out how to get myself out of this really not great situation with the fires being a half a mile from where I was at, as bad as they were. And so, for me, it became more of a, I don't do traditional prayer and the whole, there's a higher presence type deal. I'm more of a, if I'm in the image of God, then I am God, and I can pray to myself in order to overcome what I need to find the new depths to myself, to embody what I think I need to have in order to find my way forward.
So it sounds like there was a lot of confidence being taught that you've got that spark of God in you, always, as you.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I grew up hearing a lot, and that it didn't really click for me as a teenager, especially like in middle school or anything. But the older I got and the harder things got, it connected when it needed to, and that's what really mattered for me, was that when it finally connected, it was right when I needed to, and I was like, all right, no, I can make it. I can figure this out. I can get out of this. Like, we're going to be fine. I got it. And so for me, it became more of a confidence building tool, very much a kind of I have the power type deal in order to move forward.
That's a really cool way to walk through the world. The confidence of knowing you're the divine. Did anybody else, other than me, hear that maybe you were a sinner? Like at the end of the day, the best I could be was a sinner. The best I could be. And that's what I believed. And that's how I carried myself. That's how I thought of myself. Not very empowering.
No.
Not very uplifting. But that unity teaching, that spark of divinity. And really, at that time, it was barely perceptible spark. But as I took that in and realized that that was the truth that I was really looking for in those years that I thought I was without a faith, that's what I was looking for, something that could uplift me and carry me forward in a way, in the world, in a way that was positive, that was contributing goodness, and seeing that in other people. You know, the other people that really annoyed me, the other people who really got on my nerves, I got to see them differently. And so my work environment changed, my family changed, because I learned something different. That I had that divine as me, and so did everybody else. So they became teachers, companions on the road, as opposed to annoyances and disturbances.
Yeah, I never begrudged any of my team for how they chose to try to empower themselves or kind of build up their own confidence through traditional prayer or anything like that. But I was very much I just need to go ahead and actually do something about it, because when a situation like I was in, there's no planning for it. You got to just roll with whatever comes your way and figure it out as you go. And having the confidence to know that whatever happens, I can get through it was huge, especially at that time.
Oh, gosh, I bet it was. And I can say that everybody has their own journey. And you saw it in your teammates living differently, praying differently, showing up differently. You know, and my family stayed in the traditional religion. Many people stay in traditional religion, and it serves them well. I saw my father, my mother, my sister live in the faith of our upbringing and have rich, beautiful lives, and it worked for them, and it was true for them. There just came a point in my life that I needed to believe something different, and unity was what gave me that difference. And my family, until their dying days, my parents followed their faith and were pillars in their church and lived their goodness, their divinity. That spark of divinity was truly alive in them on a totally different path. My sister the same. And I could see how that served them, how that carried them in life. And this is what carried me. And then we got to that third principle, that we create our lives by the activity of our thinking, the thoughts that we hold in mind.
Yeah, that very much taking action and embodying your own truth. It really, for me, was a big tie-in to the second principle and how it kind of showed up for me, whereas, I'll be honest, I cannot by heart recite the 5 prayers principles anymore. I just can't. It's been too many years. I see them every day, but they don't stick in terms of memory, but I embody them. And I know I do, because I see it subconsciously. I see it show up in different ways. And kind of living my truth has meant that I try new things. I don't be afraid. I'm not afraid to try different things and find a new path. If something's not working for me and I feel it, I'm willing to look at something else and go, maybe that'll be it. And I switch gears. I'm not afraid to take a different route if I think that it's going to help me live a better life in the way I want to live. And very much the kind of taking charge for myself was a big thing in California, because my team was indecisive is the nicest word I'll use that I can kind of use there. They were they didn't have a lot of conviction to see through some stuff they started, but I did. And so I would very much kind of set myself up, and I kind of look back at them and I'm like, hey, look, I've got a path. we can leave right now to get away from the fire, but you gotta get on board right now. Like, this is it. I cannot spare more time. We gotta go. And I remember there was one night the fires were a quarter mile from where we were staying. I woke up to the alarm blaring, like, hey, the fires are about to come and like wipe out the town. Get up and go. I slept with the bankeys. I did not trust my team leaders to wake up to the sirens, and he did not. I had to kick him to get him to wake up. I know, not a very unique thing, but it's like, dude, we gotta go, get up. So I slept with the van keys, and all my stuff was in the van the night before. I prepped for this. So when I woke up to the sirens and I had the van keys, I looked at everyone else and went, you have 30 seconds, go. And I went and started the van. And I opened the back doors, and when they ran out, they threw all their stuff in the back and hopped in, and we were out of there 30 seconds flat. That was how I chose to embody and kind of take the action I need to do to live in the way that was true to me. Was I'm not going to let my team, regardless of how much I like being around them or not, get caught up in the fires. That's just not me. I'm not going to leave them behind. I don't leave anybody behind if I can help it. So I prepped for it, and we all got out. We slept on a rock, like 2 miles away from the fires, but we got some sleep.
I think recognizing that you embody these 5 principles is a pretty amazing concept. And I guess that comes from growing up with them.
It does. Growing up with them has very much kind of like set them inside of me in terms of like, even if I can't recite them like I know what they're supposed to be. I know for myself how they're going to show up. I can kind of see when they show up and how I grow as a person, and new things that pop up, new skills I learn, new ways I, kind of navigate life in a sense. How those 5 principles show up, I can tell when they show up and how I invite them by how I end up navigating life, and when I decide to, I guess the best way to put it is when I feel like I need to find a new way or a new skill, it shows up when I need it to.
Beauty of it. I can recite them because I had to sit with each principle and dissect it and take it apart and put it back together and understand what it meant, because I did not grow with them. I had to learn and study and practice them for quite a long time before I could say I embodied anything. And this idea that I was creating my life by what I was thinking. What person in their right mind would create that mess that I experienced? And yet, I had to trust that there was truth in that. Because what I had learned in unity to that point was proving to be true for me. And so I couldn't take just bits and pieces that felt cozy, that I wanted to take all of it. So I sat with that and started to notice what I was thinking and how it was connected to the life I was living. And little by little, very slowly, very, very slowly, I could see my life changing direction. I could see, that abundance that we talk about in my work. I was offered a job that was amazing and put me on a right path, was rewarding. Friendships, family relationships, I could see how what I was thinking was showing up every day. What I thought about came into existence. So I got to watch it very scientifically, little by little, before I really took charge and said, yes, my thinking does create. And, we're not creating alone. We're creating together right now. We're creating in this space an experience of whatever you happen to feel this experience is. We're creating it together. And when we go out along our day, we're creating with everybody else in our day, and we're creating with people all across the planet, all 7 billion people. We're creating together. So that really empowered me. Once I finally got that, then I had to be responsible for what I was doing with that. And so I had to be responsible with my thought. I felt that. No one put that on me. I chose to be responsible for what I was thinking. what I was putting into the world, how I was contributing to what you were creating and what all of you were creating. That was powerful. That was empowering and gave me a lot of charge in my life. And then moved on to that idea that affirmative prayer is aligning our mind with God's mind, and that prayer is powerful. You talked a little bit, Rowan, about how you pray. Say more about that.
Yeah. So, because I don't necessarily believe in like a higher power. California changed me a lot. I'm very much a stick to what I can see kind of guy now. But I can put stock in myself. I can put my faith in myself if I'm the image of God, if I'm the embodiment of God within me. If I have that image, if I'm made in His image, I can put my faith, my stock, so to speak, in myself. And that is the same thing for me as prayer, because it's kind of like a, best way to put it, if you've ever heard the term hyping yourself up, kind of, trying to pep talking yourself. Anytime I need to affirm, like, hey, I've encountered like a challenge, I need to be able to do something. You know what? You're gonna figure it out. You got it. You have what it takes. You have the tools you need. It's the same kind of prayer. It's like just how people will go. They'll ask God to bless them with the guidance to find the tools they need to, move forward or excel in whatever they're doing. I just tell myself the same thing. Like, you can excel. You have the tools. You will figure it out. You've got it. It is for me the very same thing as what you guys do. Except if I'm the embodiment of God, I just do it for myself. I don't pray to a higher power. I pray to myself. I will figure it out because I know I can. Because I've always been able to. And so for me, that's how I pray. I pray to essentially myself.
So when you say that, it doesn't sound arrogant. It doesn't sound boastful or any of those things. It sounds like you really know who and what you are. And you are God in expression.
Yeah, and growing up in Indy had a lot to do with that. It's one thing that I was getting taught from the day I walked in here, that I am an expression of God, that I am God's divine light expressed in the world, however you want to put it. And so I grew up with that teaching, and it's a slow process, just like it was a kind of a slow, methodical process for you. It took around 20-ish years for all of it to finally click for me, to finally kind of really mesh, if you will, with how I was living and how I thought, in order for me to understand how I needed to embody it, how it was showing up in my life, and really recognize it. And so that's why California didn't end up being as bad as it could have been in my experience. It was because I prayed to myself. I had the confidence in myself, thanks to what I grew up in, being here in Unity, that whatever I did was helping me get through it, no matter what it was. Prayer, action, meditation, the way I was living, anything I needed to do to de-stress or overcome an obstacle I had. I had all the tools, all the knowledge, all the confidence, all the guidance.
So there's a scripture that says, have I not told you that you are God's? And for me, that was, I could not say that for a long, long time. And I was well into my studies to become a licensed Unity teacher when those words could actually come out of my mouth, that I am God in expression. And when I said those words, in the back of my mind, what I heard, my mother's voice, Karen Romestan, who do you think you are? And I was in a class, and all my classmates, and I just stopped. And I sat with it, and I told my mother's voice that it's true. I am God in expression, not in an arrogant way. As a matter of fact, that is probably one of the most humbling things to realize. It humbled me greatly to think that, oh my gosh, that source that is everything, I am that. And I remember that moment so clearly, even though it was years ago. But to take that and say, God is, I am. I think and I pray. And that affirmative prayer, I was always taught, you ask, you beg, you ask and you beg. And that's how I pray. Dear God, if you find me worthy, please. If you find me worthy. And I was never worthy because I was a sinner. So this idea of affirmative prayer, again, took a very long time to take hold. But I got to say in statements, I am receiving God's abundance here and now at this moment. Wow. Big difference than in God if you find me worthy of your abundance. I am receiving God's abundance here and now. And you kiddos, when you go back to school, whenever you go back to school, remember your I am. I am courageous. I am brave. I am smart. I am God's intelligence. I know what I need to know when I need to know it. That's a game changer. That was a life changer for me. That I could affirm the goodness of the universe. I could affirm the goodness of myself. I could state what was on its way. And you know what? When I think and say in those affirmative prayers and thoughts, that's what I get to experience. I experience God's abundance in ways that I had never imagined before. Here, this is an example of God's abundance by affirmative prayer. I didn't know how life was going to go. I was of a certain age when I finally said yes to becoming a minister. I was working a full-time job to take care of my financial responsibilities. My program required that I work in my church for 20 hours and my classes. Like I said, I was of a certain age, and I wondered, how am I going to do all of that? So I prayed affirmatively, and I've shared with our Tuesday class the affirmation that I wrote as I started ministerial school. And it says, I have all the time, energy, and resources to do all that is mine to do with ease and grace and joy. And that affirmation, I use it as a prayer every day, every single day. And one by one, every obstacle that I saw just evaporated. Every single obstacle, financial, time. My minister at my church left to go to work at Unity Worldwide Ministries, and the church invited me to be their spiritual leader. So that meant I only had to have one job, and I could still take my classes. So the universe just swooped in and heard the affirmation. The universe clung to the affirmation. I am. I think I pray. The power of affirmative prayer is monumental in life. By stating and putting our intentions into the universe is really powerful.
Yeah, for me, like what you did, where you kind of went to ministerial school and it was all kind of right place, right time. In my eyes, that would be you kind of created the opportunity for yourself by putting yourself and taking the steps to be in that position. That when it opened up, you were there, right there for it. You kind of created the opportunity for yourself. It wasn't more of a, like, how you interpret it, how you interpret your path is yours. You having the universe swoop in and kind of present it to you, for me, is very much in your situation, and for me, it'd be like, no, I put myself in the situation. I took the steps to be here when this happened. I
made the right place.
I made the opportunity. That's why, because like, there's been a lot of times where opportunities don't seem to present themselves. You got to make the opportunity. You can't wait for it to come to you. Sometimes you have to make it for yourself.
Well said. Well said. And then that final principle that it's not enough to know these truths that we talk about. We can recite them, We can talk about them. We can say them every Sunday, but it's living them each and every day in our life. So how we show up as the divine, how we show up with our thoughts, how we show up as an affirmative prayer is what counts in life. So how do you show up, Rowan, as these principles as unity?
As I've gone through my life, I've been alive for 24 years, and for the last 22 I've been in unity. For me, it's very much living these principles and knowing now that I embody them and how they kind of show up in terms of how I embody them, how they show up in my life. It's meant for me that living them is doing what's best for me and trying to move forward and live in a way that I feel best represents myself and helps me move forward to what I want to do. Whether that's going back to school or like the job I have now in security. I actually really like my job. I've seriously considered going back to school for security instead and trying to become like a security consultant because I actually really like my job. And, you know, it took me 23 years to get a job that, you know, I like. And I actually really do like my job. So for me, it's kind of putting myself in a situation and having the experiences and embodying the unity principles as I do and making the opportunities I need to move forward in a way that makes me happy.
So the journey itself really isn't so important. You can take the long and winding road. You can wander in the wilderness for 40 years or more. You could be raised in it and simply embody it as you go because it's your recognition of your divine nature, recognition that you are that God essence, recognition that you are thinking your life into existence as one with that divine. It's not so much how you get there, except doing it with love. So I'm reminded of 1 Corinthians, let all you do be done with love. So Rowan, thank you for sharing your journey with us. It's been a fun month, July, of travel and seeing how it works for us. So thank you, Rowan, for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.